Hey, welcome to my Flag Op String Challenge. We continue around the world in a single line. Um, as you were hearing this one, I should be, I believe, at the airport and a couple of hours away from flying to Fiji, assuming that everything's gone well, that I haven't caught coronavirus or my family has caught coronavirus. So fingers crossed that's all going well for me. Thank you for the pointing out that I hadn't considered with this is one thing that I was doing when I had no money when I was working my way through South America is I wasn't upgrading the planes on the new parts of the connection because obviously they're going to keep getting rebuilt, and every time I rebuild I have to rebuy those planes. A very logical reason for why I'm losing so much money is because I keep spending it to shift planes back and forth. So no more shifting planes, or planes at the very end. They can stay small until we sort of move well on and go, okay, that's they're definitely set. So for those curious, it will be on this island in Nadi, which is basically where I guess the international airport is, and I would probably call their tourism town. The biggest city on Fiji is here. It's about twice the size of Nadi, but I don't think there's too much to necessarily see in Fiji. From a lot of people that who have been to Fiji before, a lot of them say it really comes down to the hotel that you stay at or the resort that you're staying at and how they are about whether it's a enjoyable thing. It's a late night flight, and we will arrive at something like 5 in the morning. So the good news is it means that hopefully my daughter will just sleep through the flight as opposed to being awake and bored. Bad news is that we won't be able to check in until the afternoon that day. So it'll be working on Friday to then trying to sleep on a plane, which I don't ever do well, for a short period of time, and then having a full day. So luckily the plan of that trip is just to relax. So even if that first day is a bit tormenting, I'm sure we'll be alright. Maputo. Alright. So what's gonna be our better route here? Let's bounce out to him. Unsurprisingly, some of these guys are gonna have some complaints about having their little planes, but that's okay. We'll cope with it. But we will still upgrade the airports. So Mozambique I haven't been to. I think I did mention that in my last video that I spent a lot of time... Well, not a lot of time. I was curious to try and work out how hard it was to get to Mozambique, and it sounded like it was a lot more tricky than was worth the effort. When I did fly from Johannesburg to Madagascar, we flew across here, and so you were across the coast, and flying over you could see a very distinctive river that sort of snaked back and forth, and so I looked up on Guru Maps, and I was like, all right, cool, that's it. I can definitely find that river here, so I'm definitely looking at Mozambique. So I haven't been to Mozambique, but I've certainly seen it from the air. One thing I was thinking about, and that comment that I made about how I'd love to, or what I'm going to have to do is just sort of like play the game on fast forward for a few hours just to let it run. I realize that won't work because if I was to do it, every single week it's just going to come back with an announcement saying, oh, some businessman isn't happy with the state of play. And I'm going to have to tick yes, so it's not going to work because it's just going to constantly need me to sort of acknowledge things that it's telling me, which is a real shame. Kigali. Wow, okay. Kigali is a hot spot at the moment. So we are just going to slowly wait for Mozambique to get a few cities before we jump out to Madagascar. So while we are waiting, let's have a read about Mozambique. Officially the Republic of Mozambique. The capital is Maputo, which was known as Lourenço Marquis from 1876 to 1976. So I would assume that means that it's, at least at some point, Mozambique might have been French occupied, from the sound of that name. Population 30 million. In the 1st and 5th centuries AD, Bantu-speaking people migrated to the present-day Mozambique. Those Bantu people definitely got around. The voyage of Vasco da Gama in 1498 marked the arrival of the Portuguese, who began a gradual process of colonization and settlement in 1505. And after over 4 centuries of Portuguese rule, Mozambique gained independence in 1975. Which shortly thereafter became the Republic of Mozambique. After only 2 years of independence, the country descended into an intense and protracted civil war lasting from 1977 to 1992. And in 1994, it held its first multi-party elections and has since remained a relatively stable presidential republic, although still faces low-intensity insurgency. Yeah, do you have any insurgency in your country? Yeah, but I mean, it's low intensity. So the official language of Mozambique is Portuguese. They definitely got around the Portuguese and the English. 2 countries that take up that much space, they really went around claiming stuff. So, Madagascar. When I was looking at going to Madagascar, or I was looking rather at places to go in the world, there were 2 halves of Madagascar that you could go and do trips in. There was a section sort of down here, which would be the rainforest, and if you're thinking like about the ring-tailed lemurs and those sort of jungles, I guess, that you're seeing in movies like Madagascar, then that's what you're talking about down this side. It's where you're going to see your multicolored chameleons, all of that sort of stuff, in your forests and I guess beaches and so on. Fun fact too, I think that flight that disappeared, that Malaysian flight that disappeared, they found wreckage of it on the coast of Madagascar there. Hypothesizing, I think it ended up somewhere in here. But just made me think of it because I was mentioning beaches on that coast. So that was one side. The other side was a much smaller sort of circuit, which was just, I think, about in here. I mean, once we claim the country, Antenna Navarro will show up as our sort of central point. Yeah, so we can jump on it. There we go, Antenna Navarro. So what we did, flew into Antenna Navarro and then drove for about 6 hours or so down this way. Decided about where you're best fitting in. Let's do that for now. Actually, no. Go straight across there. And then have these guys cut in. down to here. Well, actually, no, it was probably straight down to, say, Antisarabe, and then across to about here, where we then hopped onto a river and went down the river with our crew. At a very shallow river. Occasionally, is like we'd weave across. It was like quite a wide river, but you'd sort of notice the boat would weave through it, and it was because it was so shallow that you actually had to know which part of like it was deceptive that you couldn't just sort of like go through any part of it. There was actually a particular part that you had to go through to make sure you were staying deep enough that the boat wouldn't hit anything. And you could see crocodiles in the water and kingfishers along the side, and we got to see like the white lemurs and just some of the brown ones as well. I got to hand feed some of the wild brown ones too. They sort of descended from the trees to a spot that they obviously get used to getting fed. For the first part of that boat, so it was only about 12 of us on the boat, including crew, and there was a guy with an AK-47. He wasn't in military gear, but I'm pretty sure he was military. He was wearing a filler t-shirt, and I think at this point you've heard enough of my puns to know that I did point out that he was wearing a filler t-shirt, because if you do anything wrong, he's gonna filler you with bullets. And he was gone, I think, after the first night, and he went back. I think it was just a particular part of the river that they figured you needed protection for. But we did the first night. We sort of just stopped, and we were staying on the bank of a river, and it got windy. It got like they set up the tents, and then it got so windy that the tents were gonna go. And so, like, the crew were out, and a few of the people on the tour were out just trying to hold tents in place. And one of the guys and the soldier were both holding a tent, and he just suddenly decided that, like, nah, this was too hard to hold with one hand. So he just unslung his AK and gave it to one of the guys on the tour, who instantly stopped paying attention to trying to stop the tent from blowing away, and just started getting someone to take pictures of him holding the AK, and then swap and have them get pictures. What city have we got there? Mantia. Oh, Mantia. So then sort of traveling further down, we got to go to a village, which was amazing. Like these proper like hut style like villages to go see, which was a really neat thing. I do remember sort of posting photos of it and someone commenting on how sad it looks. Like you just want to rescue those children, and it's like, no, these kids were incredibly happy. I think if anything, it made you realize, it made you more consider how easily your day could be ruined versus how easily these kids' days could be made. And I think that was the sort of big takeaway for me, was that like they were genuinely happy. The other neat thing was that with the kids in these towns, they for the most part, I don't think they had mirrors, so they never even got to see themselves. So they were thoroughly excited to see tourists, because they just wanted tourists to take their pictures and show them, because they otherwise just didn't never get to see what they looked like. So you definitely got swamped by kids who didn't want anything from you. They just wanted to see themselves in pictures. They wanted you to take pictures of them. And I think the guide as well, he said if you did take pictures, you could send them to him, and he could print them out, and the next time he was through, give them to the kids and so on. So that was all the way down here. Then we went north. Once we sort of reached a city around here, which I can't recall its name, and hopefully eventually Madagascar might give it to me, though I'm not optimistic with Mozambique only giving me 3 in a 30 million population country that high up. In fact, let's try and see if we can speed things up while we look at a reduced portion of the map. From there we went north into the Singies, the Tsingy, the little Singy and the big Singy. And if you saw, there was very recently on Netflix there was a new animal documentary that went up, And in the first episode, they talk about the white lemurs and traversing across all these jagged rocks. If you saw that, that's what the Singi is. It's basically this rock formations that at some point, thousands of years ago, it got hit with acid rain. So it's all really sort of like jagged and messed up. But it's also, you can almost see where like the land must have been, because there's then all this, so there's really flat undercut points of it. It's quite neat. So we went up and traversed through those, climbing up over them through caves and so on. That was neat. And then after a few days, then we headed south. So we went back to the river, then had to recross the river and go south. Though before we did that, this town here, so this again, this was just, if you imagine, your dirt roads, wooden housing. It's a certainly third world. Traveling from here to there, you've got to, like, you imagine too that you've got a military escort with you as well, because there's a chance that you might get attacked by kudu. I think they're cattle's called kudu. Kudu rustlers. Kudu rustlers once came across a series of four-wheel drives, and they thought it was they thought they were police, and so they attacked a tourist with a machete. So since then, you get a military escort when you're heading north up that way. Anyway, but so this is the area in the town. But then when we came back, there was we had lunch at a place that was in that town that was, had a guy working there who'd gone and worked in like a two Michelin star like restaurant, and then come back to Madagascar to do food. So it was just in the absolute middle of nowhere. It was just this absolutely amazing, like, inner city quality restaurant, which was really sort of an amazing, just sort of like out of place thing. But then from there we went south and hit the avenue of the baobabs at sunset. So if you've ever like, and when I was looking at trying to pick which side of this trip to do, whether it was this side or this side, I realized as soon as I saw the baobabs, I'm like, oh, 100% that is the thing that you go to Madagascar to see. It makes no sense to go this way and not see that. I did mention the chameleons were on this side, but we did do a night walk at one point, which blew your mind for how many chameleons. They were just like, oh, and on this tree, here's a chameleon. On this tree, here's another chameleon. Like, they were just everywhere. Just wandering away from our hotel and going into the bush. Probably would say like 500 meters away in pitch black. That it was just amazing even to look at the night sky in that blackness. And there was also a point in that where they said they sort of, you could look down a well and you could see like 7 different snakes just wandering around at the bottom of this well. That was central South Africa there. Kimberley. So then from there, it was we swung back into Central and then up. I think it was only 10 days or so that I was in Madagascar, but it was definitely worthwhile. That whole trip, I think, was in total only about 2 weeks. I don't know if I mentioned this detail of it as well. What we did is, me and my wife used to travel. Like, we traveled a lot, but mainly to the United States. And I did start to realize that there were places. No, there was. She wanted to go to the United States again for something, but we'd had our daughter at this point. So our daughter was 2, 1 or so, somewhere around there. And she said, would you be alright if I went to the United States without you? And I said, yes, as long as I can go somewhere for the same amount of time without you. And she did, and it was a great deal. So we ended up doing 6 weeks worth of holidays. So she went to, like, say, New Zealand, America, Hong Kong, because her sort of places that she wanted to go was first world. The condition was you had to go somewhere that the other person didn't have any interest in going to. And so my traveling then is I went off the beaten path, and that was South Africa, Madagascar, and then that other trip, the Mongolia, China, Tibet, Nepal, India sort of part as well, which I wholeheartedly recommend if you do have a kid and you still want to go on holidays. Just do it without them. I did find that when I took the 4 weeks in to Asia, I didn't find that too bad. My daughter was 2 years 1 month, 2 years 2 months, somewhere around there, and I could cope with the amount of time. Whereas I found by the time I was going to Madagascar, and she was 3 and change. At that point, I reckon she was starting to miss me. Like in the first trip, she probably didn't even notice we were going. I think she was starting to miss me, and I definitely was starting to find that I was missing her more. That it made it harder. That I was like, I'm not sure I could do this anymore. Like, she's got way too much of a personality now that's missable. So what route do we think we should move from here? I think possibly I need to flip this around. So if we go get rid of that path, let's slow things down as we're about to do some significant editing. And that. We'll cut across here. And up. And no. And up. You can definitely see the amount of money I'm saving not having built these, upgraded these planes. So it doesn't make much sense to have, these guys connect to him because he's slightly further away. I think we're better off getting this guy coming to here. Then Malawi, our next one. There are a few other island nations around Madagascar here that I think aren't getting a look in on this map. Comoros, Seychelles, Mauritius. Comoros would be here. Seychelles are sort of tiny little islands up here. I would have thought Mauritius was significant enough that it could show up back here. I mean, I would say they're similar size to Fiji, and Fiji's on the map. Alright, let's have a little fun. Rest some of our places that are struggling. He's not struggling, he's just broken, I'd say, based on those numbers. It's all up his ability to... Guys, this guy's heading north, so let's thank you for the answers too on people that did answer my question last time about the logic of Fahrenheit and Celsius. It does seem that the consensus of Fahrenheit users is that it does make more sense. There was a few people who were technical, who operated in fields that meant that they used Celsius as more of an exact science sort of set, but even for them, they found that Fahrenheit was a more sort of usable thing to measure against for sort of other aspects. And I totally get that. I think that one thing that made me think about was when it comes to, are you going to curve the right way? Nah, if he's not curving the right way, I can't have that. Can't have that flight in there. That's an interesting name for a either Mozambican word or a Portuguese word. I wonder who that belongs to. Yeah, I mean, possibly if Durban cuts out far enough here. Yeah, okay. So yeah, sorry. So similar logic there. For me, I use the metric system. Growing up in the metric system, measure distances in kilometers, meters, and so on. But it makes so much more sense to me if you were telling me how tall someone was to tell me in feet. I know that 6 feet's about 180 centimeters, but if you told me someone was 205 centimeters, I'm like, I have no idea how tall you're saying that person is. If you're saying like 6'8", it's like, okay, I get that. Now potentially that is just because I watch enough American sport that the most consistent sort of comparisons of heights I have is basketball players, football players, because Australian sports will still give you the height of someone in centimeters. However, I'm not sure that there's that many Australian sports where it's a significant to know how tall someone is as it is, say, basketball or football. In football, mainly, if you're talking like, say, cornerbacks or quarterbacks or running backs. We're going to bring Malawi in here just at the end, just to sort of fill the gap to get us back to Peter. One other thing that was quite neat about going to Madagascar as well, it's just a final thought on this. I think the other tourists that went there were sort of people, the other guys that I was sort of like talking to had been to like 75 countries. One guy that had been there'd been to 90 countries. It did really seem like it was the people that go on holiday in Madagascar are serious about their traveling. Like, there's not that many people in the world that go, oh, let's go on my first holiday. Let's go to the easily accessible Madagascar. So it did seem like the people that you got to travel with were like sort of quite nice. I mean, that could just possibly be that I just got lucky in the tour group anyway. But I do wonder about a lot of Africa and yeah, I would imagine it's more really touristy places that you find that you can get lumped with people who are out of their element, aren't happy with what they're getting, and so that sort of Machu Picchu sort of tours, I think, would be where that would probably be really, really at its worst. There was a good Saturday Night Live sketch of Adam Sandler's where he was a tour company guide, and he does the, if you're miserable, one of his disclaimers is, if you're miserable at home, you will be miserable in Italy as well. That's which I do like as this won't change anything. So the Bahamas do get like a look in here. Is this the Bahamas? I assume that's the Bahamas there in that city. I didn't realize any of the Bahaman islands were that big. I mean, through this one, I have gotten a few more South African cities, so I don't think that I've reached any point that I can say, all right, well, I'm confident that I'm not getting more South African cities and can get rid of some of these smaller planes. We have dipped under 6 million here as well. I mean, as I buy more countries, they're going to slowly become more expensive. They're still not really that expensive at this point, but north is New York for this guy. It's north as well. It's already got the 2 planes, so let's just upgrade that one. Love the idea that there's people traveling, extra people going to Munich this week, and it's like, well, I hope they're intending to go next year, because that's how long it's going to take them to arrive. London. So for these guys to get to London, it's north. Does look like there's 2 planes on the 2 routes on either side of that guy, so unsurprising if he's starting to buckle. I think it's really neat to see how many African cities we've got in this section. Like, if you look at the rest of the world, I'm not sure that there's many areas that have that much concentration. Certainly not Asia. That's Asia. Certainly not Europe, sorry. Possibly this section here of South America. But I was going to say, I do wonder if it's because of the order that I've opened things up, but I realize this is essentially near the last thing opened up. So if anything, I would have thought it was more sparse. I mean, certainly we're looking more sparse down here. Hope that we're getting something in the north of Malawi to help us sort of route towards Tanzania. These aren't even the worst lines that I've currently got. This South African line is, well, that's 5,000. I mean, those are 5,000, but I think on the angle they end up just declaring they're actually harder than they really are. What is quite neat though about that, those sort of being those last trips that I feel I could do without my daughter, with the exception, I think that 1 week trip I was mentioning a little while back, where I possibly go to Vanuatu or something. It did make for an interesting pivot to go suddenly from just sort of going to America several times. Before I was 18, I'd gone to 17 different countries, I believe. And then from the age of 19 until I turned 30 something, the only extra country I added was Canada. What year was that? Whereas then, since then, like, I've added China, Hong Kong, Tibet, Mongolia, India, Nepal, Madagascar, soon to, hopefully, as you hear in this, Fiji, South Africa. And so suddenly did this pivot to get to see a whole bunch of other stuff. But what's neat now is, like I said, I think I've said in a previous one, is that now we've reached a point where it's like, no, if we're traveling, we will do it with our daughter. It's now pivoted back from those remote locations to, okay, well, what can we do that's not too far to travel and that would be sort of interesting for a young kid? And then once she gets older and starts being like a 10 or 12, all right, how mature is she? Can she travel further? Is she going to be ready to do things like safari in South Africa or go see Europe? And then when she's 15 or 16 and if she's got that same adventurous spirit that I do, then cool, all right, where are we going to go? Are we going to go see the gorillas? Are we going to go to South America and Africa? And it's cool because my wife doesn't necessarily have those sort of interests, but if I could share that with my daughter, I think that'd be really neat. So it's not necessarily great that Durban's having to just get longer and longer to get up this way, but I think that that's the only way that the string is going to stay intact. We do have a few long flights section. This one I think feels unavoidable. Just curious. 4-1 and 4-2 versus 5-3. Would I be better off just having these guys bounce in there and then back out and then having this guy cut up there? It does feel like it would make sense, right? Shorter journey's a shorter journey. I can have 8 planes. No, sorry, I can have 10 planes doing that as opposed to just 5 planes doing that if that's the worst one in southern Africa. It's probably an indication I haven't upgraded that guy. Because these are all getting upgraded to 6,400s, I think that I can almost let this go to a point where they do start to scream that they're in trouble, that I can go, oh, okay, I probably need to go back and upgrade those planes. Alright, but I'd say we can call that there with our 3 new additions of Mozambique, Madagascar, and Malawi. And as we come back, we can continue to climb our way, I would say, up to here. I think my plan will be that I'll try and get all of these countries first, and then add those 4 to the closest person. Like, quite possibly Libya could just sit inside Tunisia and also go like half in Tunisia, half in Egypt. Niger could just go to whoever's closest, same as Chad, same as the Central African Republic. But probably a little while till we get that. I would imagine that there's a few in here that we've got to knock off first. But until then, I'll catch you later. Yeah.